The Falls of the Ohio in Clarksville, this statue behind me marks the handshake between Meriwether Lewis and William Clark that launched their mission to explore the West in 1803. Now Clarksville has officially become part of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. The ceremony including this reenactment of that historic handshake. The man on the left, William Clark's great-great-great-grandson, Bud.
I get goosebumps at times, literally, you know. It's very special.
Let me, on behalf of the National Park Service, the Department of Interior, officially announce the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail has been extended.
That announcement has been years in the making. The National Trail originally stretched from St. Louis to Oregon, but earlier this year, Congress passed and the President signed Senator Todd Young's bill expanding the trail 1,200 miles east to include Clarksville.
This has really been a community-led effort, and I had the opportunity to carry this legislation across the finish line. And now the community will benefit with increased tourism, increased educational interest.
Becoming part of the historic trail means the Falls of the Ohio Interpretive Center will have access to the resources of the National Park Service.
We can help bring attention to this, but we can also bring a professional level of education and training that has existed in many ways already, but we can amplify that and expand upon this.
It's expected to bring more attention to existing sites such as this restored cabin where Lewis and Clark began planning their expedition. There may also be occasional visits from attractions such as this working replica of the keelboat the explorers used.
The Eastern legacy, for many of us, is nothing new. What's new is official recognition. And when the signage goes up, it will prompt people to visit these places.
The town council president tells me this may be Clarksville's most historic moment, except of course for that original handshake. In Clarksville, Lawrence Smith, WDRB News.
The Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail's been extended over 1,000 miles, now spanning across southern Indiana, too.
And the expansion starts in Pittsburgh. It goes to St. Louis, where the trail initially started, leading all the way to the Pacific Northwest. And today, that expansion was celebrated in Clarksville, where historians say Lewis and Clark met for the first time. WAVE News reporter Sean Bowdy was there and tells us how it happened.
Getting this project where it is today wasn't easy. And it wasn't quick. It took bipartisan efforts from across the aisle and across the river. Let's take a trip to a time before swing music. Down the Ohio to Clarksville, Indiana, at the turn of the 19th century.
Now the Lewis and Clark Trail spans the entire southern border of Indiana. But no one spot is more significant than right here at the Falls of the Ohio.
Indiana Senator Todd Young's Eastern Legacy Extension Act passed with all but one vote in the Senate, extending the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. It didn't have much trouble in the House either.
It's one of the highlights of my first week in Congress to do something productive in Congress instead of all the infighting that you see on whatever you watch.
Captain William Clark's bloodline was represented Monday as his great-great-great-grandson found his way to town as well.
It's not just marking the Lewis and Clark Trail that the Eastern legacy is all about, but rather it serves as a catalyst for the communities to recognize their own local history.
Although they couldn't make it, we heard remarks from Congressman John Yarmouth and U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell. Reporting in Clarksville, Sean Bowdy, WAVE 3 News.
A celebration today commemorating the expansion of the Lewis and Clark Trail here in southern Indiana. The expansion starts in Pittsburgh, goes to St. Louis, where the trail initially began. Historians say Lewis and Clark met for the first time at the Falls of the Ohio. Captain William Clark's great-great-great-grandson was at today's event to talk about the significance of our area.
It's not just marking the Lewis and Clark Trail that the Eastern legacy is all about, but rather it serves as a catalyst for the communities to recognize their own local history.
The expansion of the Lewis and Clark Trail was made possible with the passage of Indiana's Eastern Legacy Extension Act.
Well, here's a statue nobody's painting orange and white. At the Falls of the Ohio, there sits a statue of Lewis and Clark shaking hands, showing the moment their journey west from Clarksville began. That statue wouldn't be there without one woman. WAVE 3 News Southern Indiana reporter Rachel Krause explains why the National Lewis and Clark Trail Extension is a personal victory for Phyllis Yeager.
And this is where Lewis and Clark shook hands, and this is where it began.
Phyllis Yeager spent years ensuring that moment in history would be remembered. She started that push in 1997, partnering with local and national groups to see that Lewis and Clark's trail be extended beyond St. Louis to show its southern Indiana roots.
You know, I guess you might say I was kind of the squeaky wheel a lot of times.
Here at the Falls of the Ohio, Lewis and Clark's expedition truly began more than 200 years ago. Yeager says when she moved here, most people didn't realize that. She spent years educating people about the significance of the Ohio River and Lewis and Clark's presence here. And now the trail here reflects that.
I think it sets the historic record straight for those of us who were steeped in the lore of the West.
John McNulty, a former national reenactor from Pittsburgh, not wanting to miss the moment the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail was extended 1,200 miles, all the way up to Pittsburgh.
I drove all night and got here about an hour before daylight.
The great-great-great-grandson of William Clark, here to honor his family's legacy in the same spot where the expedition started their journey west, mapping previously unknown parts of the country. After years working to recognize that legacy, the federal recognition of these explorers' path to the Northwest is a victory for Yeager and for the community.
It's just exciting to see the community embrace the Lewis and Clark's story, and to know that we're now finally on the National Historic Trail.
What started with a handshake, now memorialized forever in history.
It's a dream come true.
In Clarksville, Rachel Krause, WAVE 3.